You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
It is Bach Week.
This is super fun.
On KFUO and The Coffee Hour. We have more to learn about Bach today, and we get to go international, which is appropriate, right?
Very, yes.
And we get to talk with one of our international friends today who gets to serve in international settings, and we're thankful for that. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, Dr. Martin Dicke, serving the Lord in Papua New Guinea and really all abroad too. Dr. Dicke, thanks so much for being our guest on The Coffee Hour today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So share with us where and who the Lord has given you to serve these days.
Well, currently I'm a missionary with the LCMS serving the Asia region. I'm not a pastor, but a musician. My first position was actually a Lutheran high school teacher in St. Paul, Minnesota for 15 years. And then I was serving churches part-time and directed a community choir for 10 years. Then I got my doctorate in acting, but then to serve as a director of music at Trinity Lutheran Church in Peoria for 14 years. But then in 2011, a church member of ours invited us to go on a short-term mission trip to the Philippines and up into the mountains of Luzon and presented some music and catechism workshops up there. So that kind of kindled the missionary spirit in me again. So then in 2014, went back to Papua New Guinea when I was born. My parents served there for 20 years and my Uncle Bill for 40. There was a large LCMS mission field there for many years. And so then that piqued my interest in foreign missions even further. And in 2015, I checked with the Office of International Mission to see if they would be interested in having me go back to Papua New Guinea and serve there. And they were. So ended up there, flew in there April 2017 and served there for 3 years. Mostly as teaching at the Lutheran Seminary up in the highlands there in the Enga province, Timothy Lutheran Seminary, teaching music, and they also asked me to teach some church history. I also traveled into remote areas, did some music workshops, and that kind of thing. Had to leave my Bach behind while I was in New Guinea. But then when the pandemic hit, well, also we're involved then in some publishing and translation projects because theological resources are a great need there. And so was working with Lutheran Heritage Foundation on that. So then when the pandemic hit, then we were advised because of the healthcare system there that it would be best for us to leave PNG. So we asked for special permission to come back to the U.S. So I brought along about 6 or 7 publishing and music projects with me. So that was what I was working on last year while in lockdown. And then Pastor Ferry, Asia Regional Director, asked me to come to Taiwan to offer some music workshops there for the Chinese Evangelical Lutheran Church. So I was there for 3 months and I just came back. So it was very, very intense experience. We did 10 workshops altogether. And we had to offer them by Zoom because they had an uptick in cases there. So they entered into a strict lockdown. And yeah, it was a fabulous experience. And I really appreciated working with Charles Ferry and working with his children. Every day at 4 o'clock, I met with the children and we did some things together. And then also with Barb Rebentish. So anyway.
There are so many things I want to know right now, but we have limited time. So tell me about, since this is Bach Week, tell me about your, I don't know, experience with Bach, how much you've studied his work, performed his works.
Well, my first experience in hearing Bach was actually in Papua New Guinea. Not that there were any performances there, because there weren't none at all,
Right.
and even still. But my parents had a record player at the time. It was just a battery powered one and a small collection of records that they had brought over, and the Brandenburg concertos, even with harpsichord at that time, which was unusual for that time, and then Handel's Messiah and some other important works like that, and I just was gravitated towards them and listened to them often and regularly. And then our aunts and uncles in the U.S. every now and then sent some stuff over to us. And so our aunt in Minneapolis sent over a record of Paul Mons playing the organ, and the first piece was this huge organ work. And at that time, it's like, okay, that's what I want to do. So I went down to Australia for high school. That was what we did at the time, and so got my good instruction in piano down there. And then when our family returned to the U.S. in 1974, then I actually was able to study with Paul Mons for a little bit, and then some other people at Concordia College St. Paul, and then went on to get advanced degrees in choral conducting. So that's kind of a snapshot of how I got involved. But yeah, studying Bach, it's just like a infinite topic, and there's so much music to perform and to study that I've had the opportunity to perform many of the keyboard works, and also conduct some of the cantatas, and even a couple of the big like St. Matthew Passion, and I guess conducted the Bach at the Sem twice. So that was quite a powerful experience also.
You've been involved in a lot. I mean, there's a lot of Bach to be involved in, but you've been involved in quite a bit. You said your first experience was listening to Bach in PNG on record players, which sounds exotic, I suppose. Was the community around you also involved? Like, did community members in PNG actually like come to your parents' house and listen with you?
No, the music in PNG was quite different. They only really sang songs, and each dialect only had one melody. They would sing every single song, either whether it was a bridal song or a battle song, whatever, to just one melody. And then the only instrument that they used was a drum called a kundu drum. So it was quite different. And nowadays, going back as a missionary, now guitars have been introduced. They all want to play keyboards, but all they have is electronic keyboards. And so I did some teaching on keyboard, how to chord different things. And but keyboard takes a lot longer to learn. So I actually had to teach. I had to learn guitar a little bit to actually serve in Papua New Guinea. So fortunately, the only songs they sing only in G major over there. So I only had to learn 5 chords.
Oh my goodness!
And now you can work at any Lutheran camp too.
Yeah,
there you go.
Right, exactly.
In G.
Yeah. Well, it's not really a G because all the guitars are out of tune, so you never know what key it's in, but it's a G chord.
There's that.
Well, I find this fascinating to learn about music in different cultures. Where have you seen, and I want to unpack this more, so you can just give us like maybe the short introduction now, and we can unpack this more in the second half, but where do you see the influence of Bach in some of the cultures where you've served? So obviously not a lot of influence of Bach where you serve in Papua New Guinea, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not known there. Of course, having Bach or playing and studying the music of Bach, first of all, requires the instruments that he used, or what we would say were modern instruments, but also requires an educational system, which is lacking in Papua New Guinea, and there is more now, but not really in that way. Not really any music education. going that way. But and his music is. Well, he wrote very difficult and creative and imaginative music, but he also wrote music for children. And so, yeah, I mean, his influence is just worldwide. And so it's fascinating. There's, Bach societies and choirs and orchestras all over the world. I mean, even in Japan, there was a professor there. His last name is Suzuki. I forget his first name, but he started the Bach Collegium. He went and studied harpsichord in the Netherlands and then came back and then started his own little Bach group there.
That's fascinating just to see the reach, the influence of Bach on so many cultures around the world. It's in a sense how the music of Bach has transcended culture to some degree, or I don't know, is that the right word? Is it transcending culture or connecting cultures?
Well, I think both. Yeah, transcending cultures and connecting cultures, and it's very fascinating, and it's not only Bach but also Handel, especially with the Messiah. And I was thinking about Handel last year and developing a little proposal for Charles Ferry and the Taiwan Lutheran Church, and I realized that Handel never espoused to. Well, he grew up Lutheran, and he never proclaimed to be of any other faith. And I thought, I bet he remained Lutheran his whole life. And sure enough, I then doing some more research on the Messiah, discovered that Jeffrey Thomas, the director of the American Bach soloists in San Francisco, had come to the same conclusion, and has a video actually out on YouTube about that. But that, Handel remained a staunch Lutheran his whole life, and so both of these giants, their music is just Handel with the Messiah, and then Bach with his cantatas, and then his big works, but then also his little music for children. They just formed the music for the rest of from their time for hundreds of years, well, to the end of time, actually. And their music will be performed to the end of time.
Mm-hmm.
So what you've just informed me is that we now also need to have a Handel week.
We ought to.
Make it happen.
Today we're talking with Dr. Martin Dicke, serving the Lord in Papua New Guinea, but really serving abroad in a variety of places. And we're celebrating Bach Week here and learning about the influence of Bach in so many cultures. We have more to talk about with Dr. Dicke in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that, to live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
We are celebrating Bach Week, the commemoration of Johann Sebastian Bach on The Coffee Hour and on KFUO this week. And our guest today, Dr. Martin Dicke, serving the Lord in Papua New Guinea. And you've had the chance to teach in a variety of places. You mentioned that you, Dr. Dicke, that you had recently given some lectures to our friends in Taiwan. Tell us about getting to serve there and present these lectures on Bach in Taiwan.
Oh, yeah. Well, I really appreciate the invitation I received from Pastor Miao, the president of the Taiwan Chinese Evangelical Lutheran Church in Taiwan, and Pastor Charles Ferry. And so, I developed a proposal, and they really liked it, was able to get the visa, and so went over there. And I had, 12 or 14 different topics on the list, not expecting that they would want all of them, but they wanted 10 of them. So it was a very, very busy 2 months once I got out of quarantine. But we well, one of the things that I also did in Papua New Guinea, which I also did for the church in Taiwan, is like, well, let's look at the Bible and let's see what the Bible says about worship and what the Bible says about music. And so those were two of the different lectures. One I call The Eternal Song, which talks about, it's a summary of all of the music in the Bible, starting from right after creation. The book of Job tells us the angels got together and they were just so amazed with what God done. They sang a song, and then going through all the way to the book of Revelation, where we have the choirs singing eternally to the Lamb of God. So that was one of the lectures. Another one then was, well, let's look at the book of Psalms then, and there was an intense look into that. But there's also a new Lutheran hymnal there, which one of my co-missionary, Sandra Ryan, helped put together. And so that was published in 2019, a couple of years ago. And so I did some workshops, which were essentially some hymnal introductory workshops. And so like, well, okay, since we're Lutherans, what is the Lutheran hymnody in this hymnal? Well, that was one of them. And Lutheran hymnody is all about preaching God's grace and love and mercy. And so we emphasized that. Then on the one on Psalms, how do we go about singing the Psalms? And so we talked about chanting the Psalms and different aspects of that. I did also some lecture demonstration recitals. One was on Handel's Messiah, actually, because that is probably still the only musical composition that tells the entire salvation story. And it is probably the most performed of all of the compositions ever written by any composer in the whole world. And so that was a lot of fun. And then one on Lutheran composers, and that was specifically for the Lutheran church musicians there, just a brief introduction on some of our Lutheran composers, which would include Handel and Mendelssohn, actually. And then probably one of my favorites was just a lecture demonstration recital on Anna Magdalena's Notebook. There's a new edition out of Anna Magdalena's Notebook, published by Peter's edition, and the editor of that was Christoph Wolff, who is the preeminent Bach scholar of our time, and that is where a lot of the Bach's children's music comes from, that children all over the world play, but they don't really know where it comes from. And so the lecture is just to tell them the whole story of this notebook, and play some of the music, and tell, well, Bach had 2 wives and 20 children. And so basically introduce a little bit of music history into that, but then also it's easy to weave some theological messages into that, like Bach. When he sat down with a blank piece of paper, the first thing he would do after he stuck his pen or his quill into the ink pot was write JJ at the top of the page, which is short for Jesu Juva, Jesus, help. And then at the very end, after he finished, SDG, Soli Deo Gloria, which is a perfect opportunity for us to preach about vocation and Luther's doctrine of vocation, dedicating all of our work to God, praying for help at the beginning of any task, and then, at the end, thanking God for it and asking God to do whatever he can with it. So that was one of the messages. But then also there's lots of songs in there about that we don't need to fear death. Like, for instance, Bist du bei mir, and another one that I was not familiar with until I got this new edition, Schaffe in mir, God, create in me, O God, make me do, actually this one relates more to the doctrine of vocation, but let me do your work, and dedicating our work to God. And so, yeah, that was a lot of fun. In fact, I mean, if there's any churches, anybody listening that would like me to come and offer this lecture demonstration recital or any of these other presentations, I'd be very happy to do it. Just jot me a note at Martin Bach.dicke@lcms.org. And I'd love to explore the opportunity of coming to your church or school or community.
Sounds so fun. I want to learn all of these things.
You have 20 more questions.
I have 20 more questions in like
6 minutes.
6 minutes. When you do these lectures, when you teach people about church music and about our hugely rich musical heritage in the Lutheran Church, what are some of the things that you actually learn about this music as you're teaching, and you see this, you have this feedback from the people that are receiving all of this wonderful information? Are there things that you actually learn about music and about this music history and things that you maybe didn't realize before?
Well, I'm still in a continual process to understand the biblical song and then help people understand it. And so then encountering the music is a way of finding a new song that stems from these biblical songs and then proclaims a message that God proclaimed in his biblical song. So right now I'm doing a little bit of study on the whole concept of aesthetics and theology. I'm going to be doing a lecture for an upcoming presentation at Concordia Seminary, where there's a conference in September on this issue. And it's really interesting to study the theological literature, because now the Reformed theologians are coming out in support of music and coming to our position of music, whereas John Calvin and Zwingli must be turning over in their graves, because they has like no, and but Luther was like, no, this is a gift of God. It's part of the created order, and so we need to use it for God's glory and to God's end, which is exactly what. Then that's why there was this huge flowering of Lutheran musicians, and still is today. I mean, there's thousands, tens of thousands, millions, of us all over the world, and so that's one of the fascinating things. But there's really still not enough for all of the churches, and so I'm working with the organization David's Harp to develop materials to help teach a new generation of church musicians about this music and this incredible song that God gave us, the song of his love and mercy and grace, which is what I call the eternal song, because we're going to be singing it forever. So, so just to encounter new pieces that proclaim this is always fun, and then to be able to share them with people. And their reception of it is, it really, in Taiwan, the reception and the thank you notes were amazing. After 2 weeks after I got out of quarantine, then they entered into a very strict lockdown because there was a big uptick in cases. And it was actually the first lockdown they experienced for the whole pandemic. So I ended up having to do all these presentations on Zoom. And so one advantage to that is I didn't have to travel all over the country as much, and was able to spend more time in preparing the presentations. The other advantage is that now they're recorded and anybody can watch them at any time. But the people were just very, very thankful that they had something to do and something to encourage them during these times, and so that was very fulfilling.
We have just about 2 minutes left. Reflecting on all that you've learned about Bach and some of the places you've gotten to serve in Papua New Guinea, and just all the cultures that you've learned about, how have you, from your perspective, seen the Lord use the work of Bach for his purposes in the church around the world?
Well, historically, the music of Bach is so important in music history that it stands as a testament to the talent and creativity that God gave to him. A lot of the people that perform it, though, however, don't believe in God, and but the music is so great and its beauty is so great that they like Bach, and But then Bach, of course, much of his music is sacred and proclaims the Lutheran faith, proclaims our understanding of the Bible, and emphasizes God's love, mercy, and grace. And so when people who perform this music then go in and study the texts, they're learning about this, whether they accept it or not, or whether the Holy Spirit then moves in their heart to accept it is my prayer. But even in secular universities, when you study music history, Bach cantatas are so important that there's a page in all of these textbooks on the Lutheran Church year, and they have to study the Lutheran Church, even at these universities that are would outright reject the Christian faith. In music history class, they still are being exposed to it. So, so God is using Bach as a handle, as a testament then to the faith. So it's very, very fascinating, very interesting.
Serving as a witness, even after he's gone on to glory, his legacy, serving as a witness. Oh, man, so much to learn during Bach Week. Our guest today, Dr. Martin Dicke, serving the Lord in Papua New Guinea. Thanks so much, Dr. Dicke, for being our guest on the Coffee Hour.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.